Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and also a good evening to few of you you all have been joining us at the global level. So I understand there are different time zones for each one of you. So welcome to this SBR webinar support for September 2025 exams. My name is Richa and I work as Education Support Manager at ACCA. So our session today is broadly on Examiner's Report Unlocked that provides an in-depth exploration of latest March-June 25 examiners reports and will also be uncovering strategies to boost your exam performance. So Alina Karim has joined us today to deliver this session and help explore common pitfalls and share essential technical points also with examples. So during this session, she will also be guiding you on how to effectively use available exam practice resources, especially the marking guide, sample answers, like how to present your exam responses clearly and confidently. We will also cover some of the live questions coming in from you in Q&A box, so keep putting them there. Before I hand over things to Alina, I will quickly run through a few quick housekeeping items. So you will find a few number of buttons on your screen. So one is for the slide and media player that you should keep selected because you will need to view both of them during the webinar. Use attendee chat function with your fellow participants and also let us know that from where you are joining us from. But please avoid sharing any much of the personal details on the chat. And also look for the icon which resembles like a file. So here, clicking on this, it will give you an access to helpful materials which are very much related to today's session. And those also include direct links as well to take you at different home pages. So feel free to move things around on your screen and resize the windows however you like. And if you ever cannot hear us or see any visuals, just try refreshing your browser. By registering for this webinar, you will get an email tomorrow with all the details like how you can watch it again. So need not to worry if you miss anything or run into technical issues. You will be able to catch up the recording later on. So I am going to hand over to Alina in a moment and we'll be back with you all towards the end of the session. If you want to ask ACCA or Alina any question in the meantime, please keep posting them on Q&A box. But also please do listen to Alina's slides delivery and all because many of the things will already be covered during the presentation time. So just a quick note, we may not be able to respond to everyone individually, whether through chat or verbally, but we will do our best to share questions and answers that are helpful to everyone. With this, handing over to you, Alina.
Thank you so much, Richa. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining in the session today. The September exams are coming up, and I know that this is the time in which everyone is geared up for the final push. We become really focused at this point in time. So we are going to discuss today a lot of different techniques that you can use to score maximum in your exam, and that we are going to do by learning from the past mistakes. The mistakes that the others have made, the examiner has highlighted, and so we are going to see how we can avoid them in the upcoming exam attempt. So let's start with our session. Here we are in the examiner's report unlocked. The examiner issues an examiner report after every 2 sessions. So the latest report that we have is from the March-June 2025 session. We are going to pick up the learnings from that report and also the exam that was tested. It has been published on the ACCA practice platform, so you can go through it from there also. This is a little bit about me. I'm an FR and SBR expert tutor with ACCA with over 15 years of experience of teaching and conducting trainings globally. I have done ACCA myself, so I can definitely assure you that the version of SBR exam that was available then, I've attempted it myself and I've been teaching it for so long that what I aim to do today is to bring out all those learnings and share them with you. Currently, I am teaching in the SCANS eCampus, FR and SBR exam. Now, coming to the main point. Now, our agenda for today is that we are going to see the key insights from the examiner's report. We are going to see how practice platform is working and how things look like on that. We are going to talk about the latest syllabus changes. I was seeing a couple of questions have already been popped in related to that, some effective exam strategies, and in the end, there is going to be a live Q&A. But please don't wait till the end to put in your questions. Put them in during the session, and some might be repeated, but we'll try to cover them all by the end of the session. Now, coming to the first part, which is related to the key insights from the examiner's report. Uh, there are some issues that have come up again and again and again in the examiner's report. At times, honestly, I feel for the examiner because I think they just need to copy paste the same thing in the next report. And they're frustrated because they say that we are identifying these issues every time. And still, the students are doing the same mistakes again. And I feel that is probably because the students, some of them are not looking at the feedback from the examiner. So today I have summarized the key issues for you so that you can learn from this session and identify what are the things that you can do differently. The first part of this is regarding the sequence of the answers. A lot of students feel the pressure that they need to attempt the questions in the same sequence in which they have been tested. Now, question number one is these are the words of examiner, that there are quite a few complex workings in it. And at times, students spend too much time in attempting question number one first, and that is why they compromise the time ultimately on question number three and four. Remember, yes, you can go for question number one if you're most comfortable with it, but there is absolutely no restriction by your examiner about the sequence of the questions. You can attempt them in any order that you want. Don't read all the questions at the start. The maximum you can do is just flip through them and take a look at what they are about, just a glance, not more than that, not more than 1 minute in glancing through the questions. And pick out the ones that you're more comfortable with. I know there are some students who say we are more comfortable with question number two, so accounting issues and ethics. So we want to start with that because that gives us confidence. So whatever your strength is, identify it. That's very important. Identify it. And how can you identify it? By doing practice. So in your practice, you will know what is best for you and then apply it in your mock exam so that you have in your mind that what order are you going to follow in your exam. But there is absolutely no restriction by the examiner about it. Now, some common issues overall that have been identified by the examiner, the biggest one is time management. Students spent too much time on question number one and question number two, and question number three and four are compromised. So you need to manage your time accordingly. You have 1.8 minutes per mark available. So for like a 5-mark question, you have almost 8 minutes available. Remember, that is for reading, planning, and writing your answers. So all of that has to be done within that time period. You need to practice accordingly, and while you are dealing with the time issues, what you need to do is that identify the time on a part-wise basis. So rather than just identifying them, I'm going into the solutions also, but this is something that will save me time towards the end. But this is very important that when you see the time, because a lot of students, they see the overall time of the question. So a 30-mark question, how much time is going to be applicable? They see the overall time. Please keep in mind that see the time management issue on a part-wise basis. That will help you a lot in remaining focused. Students do not answer all the requirements. This I'm going to come on in a short while also. Knowledge-based things are just mentioned and application is not done to the scenario. Then rote learned knowledge is just regurgitated. The application is not again done to the scenario, and the presentation of answers is such that the markers are not able to identify what the student is trying to say or pick out on all the points that have been mentioned. So these are the common issues that have been highlighted. I haven't discussed the solution of the rest because I'm going to come to them in a short while, but these are the most common issues identified every time. Now, my main point over here is that when you go to the exam, if you are finding there is a lot of material that the SBR examiner has already provided in advance. You know the syllabus, you know the question types, you know the broadly speaking how marks are distributed. You have the access to practice platform. You know what the software is going to look like, what the platform is going to look like. So when you go to the final exam, these things that you already know should not be a challenge for you in the exam. And you will be surprised at the number of students, because when I see the result, I see the feedback of students globally. Many of them struggle with the platform. So please make sure that whatever has been provided by the examiner in advance, that should not be a challenge for you. So practice properly with the resources that are available. Now I'm coming to um, some particular very question focused feedback, and then I will move back to the generic tips regarding the exam, because over here we are focusing on the examiner report, so this is an area that I wanted to work on. The examiner said that for improving the performance on your question number one, which is related to group accounts or consolidation, and normally a small part related to the an accounting issue is also tested in it. And the last part of this question, which is normally approximately 14 marks, it's not going to be beyond 14 marks, but almost 14 marks are going to be available for the pre-formatted workspace in which you have to make a financial statement. Now, the examiner's feedback as per the report on question number one is that first of all, you have to cover the knowledge gaps. You need to revise properly the FR consolidation techniques. You need to cover the techniques over here. You have the FR assumed knowledge. You have step acquisitions, or what we call piecemeal acquisitions. You have disposals. You have foreign subsidiaries, and you have statement of cash flow. So you need to have knowledge of all of these, and a lot of things are also repeated over time as well. So practicing is very important. This we have already covered. Manage the time as per the marks. Use progressive column adjustments to move from draft to final statement. Now, this is something very interesting that the examiner says that I provide the pre-formatted workspace, and some students start making adjustments within the figures that have been given in the pre-formatted workspace. Please don't do that. For a good presentation, the point that we just discussed in the previous slide, for good presentation, you have spreadsheet columns. Give a heading of the issue. For example, you have an IS-19 related issue, so defined benefit obligation. Give a heading of that and make the relevant adjustments in one column. Then move to the next one. You have sold, or you have done a disposal of subsidiary. Give the heading disposal of subsidiary, do that adjustment in the next column. So please use progressive columns for adjustment to reach the final figures or in the pre-formatted workspace. Now, this is something that the examiner again has said, please avoid using formulas that obscure the audit trails. The examiner says that the student put in too many figures as calculation in one cell, and therefore it is very difficult for us to identify that what exactly the student is trying to say. So please be clear in your working. When you are putting in the formula also, it's better you put in proper figures in it, multiply, divide, keep workings. My recommendation would be that 2 to 3 figure working. Beyond that, it should be a separate working. Okay, so please do that, because the markers are being unable to follow the working, and therefore the students then don't get marks. Clear referencing should be done. Remember, in question number one, whatever you are doing in initial parts, it's not just tested over there. Its application is going to be in the last part also, which is the pre-formatted workspace. So make use of that time, and my recommendation would be that as soon as you solve a part, let's suppose you solve part A, any figures that are related to it, go in the spreadsheet workspace and put them in over there. That's done. You have to do them. It's not as if this is going to vary from exam to exam. So as soon as you do an adjustment, go in the pre-formatted workspace part, put in that figure so that you're done with it and you can save your time rather than coming back to it towards the end of the question. Then Please don't type over the existing figures that have been given by the examiner. Students, do that. Okay. Then a couple more things that linking different parts. I've just covered that. Avoid listing accounting standards or just generic knowledge. So that's not going to get you marks in this particular question. This is a very focused question. Just write the very relevant part of the standard. Focus on the scenario, and that is how you can get the marks related to this. And focus on how the information in exhibits impacts the financial statements. This is, I would say, the most important tip that I'm going to follow in the remaining questions also. That while you're talking about the information, always pick out every part that is mentioned in the question. Guys, a couple of things that you have to remember. The ACCA exam has been reviewed over and over again by the writers to make sure that nothing irrelevant is there in the question. When I say question, I mean the exhibits as well as the requirements. Over time, the examiner has started giving even more detailed requirements. So make sure that you answer each and every part. That's how you're going to ensure maximum marks. And also, every word in your exhibit is going to be related to your answer. If you're finding something that's written in the exhibit and you're not using it in your answer, you're missing something out. So please make use of the information in the exhibit in your answer. That is something very important. Mark it, cut it, that I have used this information, and that is how you can score maximum marks. Now, just an application of it. Here is what your practice platform looks like in terms of your question. So this screenshot I've directly taken from the ACCA practice platform. You open it, you have go to the question number 1. You can see the functionalities, the main question. On the left-hand side are the exhibits requirements and the response options. Then this was the exhibit which was provided. Now you see, if I talk about the part number 1, the acquisition part said provides information about the acquisition of shares in buying company. Now, over here in the exhibit, they gave the detailed information. I've highlighted it, but I'll just discuss the key points. Initially, an investment was made in associate because there was significant influence. Then a further acquisition was done in it at the reporting date, which converted the significant influence to control. So it became a subsidiary. Now, in this case, they had given you information related to associate acquisition, then it becoming a subsidiary, so a step acquisition. Then they had given an issue. There was an error also which said that NCI was recorded at proportionate share of net assets, although the group policy is to measure it at fair value. And then they had given a goodwill calculation, which was again wrong. So half of the question was testing straightforward knowledge application, and half of the question was asking you to correct the errors that have been made in an already done working. Now, in this question, the requirements also guided you straightforward. You can see how long the requirements are. The longer the requirements are, the more the examiner is trying to help you in your answer. So over here, it said explain with calculations. Remember, if the question just says calculate, you don't need to write any explanation, right? But over here, it said explain and calculate, and then they said what is going to be the correct treatment of the investment. So what were the investments, not investment, associate investment, and then subsidiary investment. So reading the question carefully is very important, that we are talking about a plural of investments over here. And then the question asks you to calculate the revised goodwill. And there were 10 marks allocated to it. Now, 10 marks means immediately 18 minutes I have available for reading this question, planning it, and writing the answer. Now, the structuring of answer. A lot of students say we struggle with how I am going to structure my answer. My recommendation in this is that follow the sequence of information given in the exhibit, because that's what the examiner does. information is given in the same sequence in which the requirement is asked. So you have to write the answer also in the same sequence. So my recommendation over here with respect to structuring of the answer is that first of all, you start off with that there was a significant influence when the first acquisition was done, and that showed that it is an associate. So you first tell the marker that you've understood that there is a significant influence, and as a result of that, it is an associate. Then you have to value it because the question said how the accounting treatment of investments is going to be done. So I tell the examiner that I know equity method of accounting is used for valuing associates, and in that till 31st December, when the next acquisition was done, I am going to value it accordingly. So I do the calculation also accordingly because the question asked me to explain and calculate. Then I tell the marker that on the next step, further acquisition was done, which resulted in control. So when the control was done, that was through majority of the voting rights, and in that case, it became a subsidiary. Then, how do we measure in general the consideration for step acquisition? We value the previous amount at fair value. We calculate if there is a share for share exchange. We calculate it as per the shares issued by the parent company. So we calculate the fair value of the consideration also, and that is how we measure the investment for step acquisition. Then you see it's exactly in the same sequence in which the information was given in the question. And then I tell that the valuation of NCI was done wrong. It was done at proportionate share. It was not supposed to be done like this. It has to be done at fair value. And for this purpose, I'm going to take subsidiary companies' number of shares attributable to NCI and multiply them with the subsidiary company's market value per share. And then lastly, I'm going to do the correction with respect to the calculation of goodwill. So you see, the structuring of the answer is very simple and very straightforward. Now remember, in the examiner answer that is given, that is like a perfect answer. We are not going to aim for perfection. Yes, you can do it, but please make sure that you're covering all the basics, because even by covering the basics, all of these points, you can easily pass the exam. So that's the structuring. Now, this was the answer given by the examiner. I included it because I wanted you to go through it, but it's in the same sequence pretty much. And even if you change it, the structure that I've recommended, that is something which is exactly as per the information given. Now, the last part of this question, as I said, was related to, and it's always related to, the pre-formatted workspace. This part where draft is written up till here, the information was given in the question. This is what we mean by the progressive classification across columns. So you see here, the first column was related to reclassify Brian as associate. So classifying it as an associate, then giving the profit share as associate. So you can see even that is done in a separate column. Then remeasuring to the fair value. When further acquisition was done, the previous one was calculated at fair value, goodwill calculations, NCI calculations, the share issue that was done, and as many columns as you want. So please follow the same structure. Put the information in as you are solving the part, and then you can move on. And remember, you can solve in both. One question you can solve in both Word and spreadsheet parts. The marker is going to see both the answer spaces and then give you marks accordingly. Now, with respect to the marking scheme of this part, it said that if you write everything correct about investment in associate, that gave you 3 marks. This was identifying that it is an associate because of significant influence, and then doing the calculation of investment in associate till 31st December. Then step acquisition had 8 marks associated with it because you were talking about previous investment fair valuation, new share for share exchange, NCI valuation, all of that was 8 marks. And then goodwill calculation was for 3 marks. Now, if I do a total of this, a total of all of these, so here we are talking about roughly, the examiner has given 14 marks over here. But in reality, when we are seeing the maximum marks, they are 10. So what does this show? That in certain questions, you even have the margin that you miss out a little point and still you can get a lot of marks. So in most of the questions, you have this flexibility available. So this marking scheme is available for all the questions in your exam. They're available at the end of your standard solution in the practice platform. Please go through these for the past exam papers. It will give you a very good insight as to what you need to write to get the maximum marks. Okay, done. Now, last part over here with respect to the feedback, then we'll move to question number two. Um, Avoid the temptation to jump to the year end position. Remember, a change was happening during the year. So you need to talk about the during the year adjustment also. Many students made the mistake that they just focused on the year end working. Now, and then linking the questions to the next part, that is very important. Making proper columns, that is very important. All of this we have covered. So this is all with question number one from my side. Sorry, we have a little restricted time. So right now I'm not taking questions in the middle, but anything that you have related to what we've just regarding question number one, please put it in the chat box and we'll discuss it in the Q&A. I hope this has helped you gain insights related to the question number one. So this was also something application of knowledge and proper skills and irrelevant answers also. This was another part in which, an adjustment had to be done with respect to defined benefit obligation. And the examiner said the students started writing the comparison of defined contribution and benefit plan. That's even if that's completely correct, that is irrelevant. And that's not going to get you any marks. Okay, so a classic example of where students wrote the correct stuff, but it was irrelevant, so no marks were given for it. Now, coming to the question number two, a lot of students' favorite accounting issue and ethics question. Now, in your question number two, again, the examiner refers that please avoid using generic or superficial references of standards. Make very relevant comments within a standard also. Just make reference of that relevant part of the standard. Then clearly explain all aspects of a transaction, because you see, mostly in our ethics question, the first part is related to an accounting issue where something is being done wrong. You need to identify what is being done wrong, and you won't know it till you know what is the correct accounting treatment. So you need to know the correct accounting treatment, tell what is going wrong, and how it can be corrected. Over here, in the first part, you don't need to talk about the ethical issues. Just focus on correct, relevant standard accounting treatment, what is being done wrong, and how can that be corrected. This three-step approach, and you can solve the first part of question number two. So avoid any generic answers. Be very specific to the scenario. Please do not copy paste from exhibit. The markers know they're not going to give you any marks for it. It's just a wastage of time. Okay? And avoid vague comments. This is now more related to ethical issues. Something like saying this is unethical. Now, yes, we know it's unethical, but why? Now, please remember, and that's what when I'm teaching also, I tell my students that you're going to hate this word by the end of the course because I'm going to use it so many times, but this needs to be ingrained in your mind. In SBR exam, every treatment that you do, you need to have a why related to it. You need to tell why are you recommending this treatment? Why should this accounting treatment be done in a different way? Because the standard is guiding in this particular way. So why is it an ethical issue? Because it is attached to certain dilemmas. So everything that you write, it has to be attached with a reason. So just giving a vague comment that it's an unethical thing to do, that's not going to get marks. Apply ethical principles to the scenario. Again, remember, you need to know the exact terms. So, five ethical principles and five threats to ethical principles. These 10 words you need to remember. That's the only thing I will say you need to rote learn, because these words that you need to exactly put it in your answer and present answers logically, because this has professional marks associated with it. Lastly, identify the ethical breaches and recommend practical actions. This is something which is required. It was required in the last exam also, and some students just mentioned ethical breaches, did nothing about the practical actions, therefore losing marks which were related to the practical actions. Now, over here, you can see what I was just mentioning, that you have to mention what are the ethical principles that are being compromised. So, in this particular question, there was a self interest threat, there was an objectivity issue, there was a lack of integrity. So, these are the items you have to mention. Then there were threats. So, there was an intimidation threat. Don't just write all the threats, or don't just write that, in every question there is a professional competence issue, there is a professional behavior issue. No, you need to know the principles and the related threats, but keep them very specific to the scenario. Read the scenario. You should have those 10 words in mind, the ethical principles as per the code, and the five threats, and immediately link to the scenario that what is required over here. So this was the standard solution of the examiner, where it was identified, and then in the end, actions were also recommended for this. If you structure this properly, trust me, you don't need to write anything extra to get the professional marks. Okay, so over here also you can see the mark allocation that is there. Now, in this case, in the first part, there were three issues. So the examiner said you had to give headings of all three. It's better to keep them very clearly separate and discuss all the issues. And then, in case of application, in case of part B, you have to apply and discuss ethical principles to the scenario. So, there an issue regarding temporary contract, an issue regarding an incorrect analysis, a going concern uncertainty, and then there were 4 marks separately available for actions and barriers that are there. So, plan your answer accordingly, and if you just write in this systematic way, automatically you are going to get the professional skills marks. Okay, so again, it all comes back to make the answer relevant to the scenario. And about the ethics part, 10 vocabulary words which are ethics as per code, and the threats to them, they should be in your mind, they should be quoted, and actions should be provided. Now, once again, the examiner also recommends that make a short plan within your answer space, because normally these questions are not structured well and there is no reference to the scenario. I'm showing these extracts from the examiner feedback so that you know that the examiner has been repeatedly saying this over and over again. Okay, so this was all with the question number 2. Now, any questions that you still have related to question number 2, pop them in the chat box and I will come back to them. Mention the question number so that when I'm reading the questions, I know exactly what you're talking about. I hope the question number 2 overall structure is clear to you. Then, coming to question number 3. Now, in this, the examiner said that many candidates lack the specific knowledge of the standards tested, which means that either the students have not prepared properly or they did not know how to write properly. So, this is something in which the examiner was very worried that this question showed that the students are not covering the syllabus properly, which is a very big concern. You see, as I said, what is available to you in advance? That is your responsibility. Then, once you've prepared that, then in the exam, you can easily perform well. So, something very important is that cover the syllabus properly as per the instructions. I always recommend the students take out the syllabus and start marking it. If you have marked the whole syllabus, there is nothing in exam that can be a surprise for you. I'll take the example of this question later in my presentation also, but they said there was rote learning, the question related to modification of revenue. The students again wrote the 5 step model, completely irrelevant. Now, the 5 steps were perfectly written. So someone would think, I have written the 5 steps perfectly. I'm going to get marks over here. But no, that was not what the question asked. So there were 0 marks for it. Okay. Now, tailor explanation as per requirement, read the question properly, don't recalculate the figures already provided. So if a ratio has been calculated accordingly, you don't need to recalculate it. You have to take it on the value that the examiner has provided and solve it accordingly. And identify carefully, especially with respect to investments, that whether you're dealing with an asset or a liability. This mostly happens in case of financial assets and financial liabilities. And use proper headings for steps. Now, this is something that was highlighted by the examiner. It was the worst performing question of the exam. Candidates had not properly prepared for it, and therefore, and there was a time issue also. Then, lastly, your question number 4. There were conceptual issues, regurgitation of definitions without discussing usefulness to it. This is something very important, that question number 4 is related to investors. You need to be focused on investors rather than giving generic answers. And again, it needs to be structured. By now, you can see same issues have been identified again and again. This was related to conceptual framework. It was not properly written. There was a lack of knowledge, lack of proper application to the scenario. And that is what becomes a very big challenge again, and a time issue also, which is not managed properly. Now, uh, this was all with your question wise analysis. In your practice platform, you all have access to it through your MyECCA account. You can go to SBR, and when you submit your answer, this is what your answer space is going to look like. You have sample answer. You can see the marking scheme over here. The complete answer is also available. These are the exam attempts which are available. You have ample practice available in the practice platform. Now it's on you to properly practice it and attempt the questions for the best, outcomes. Now, uh, a few things about the syllabus changes, because I know that's also a concern for the students, because September is the first attempt in which a few new topics are going to be tested. The summary of these changes are that IFRS 18 is going to be tested. There is IFRS 19, a very small part, a very straightforward application of it can be tested. Then you have MPNs, which are the management performance measures, also a part of IFRS 18. They are going to be tested. And the examiner has said that they have removed the integrated reporting from the syllabus because now the focus is going to be more on sustainability reporting. Let's deep dive into it a bit more. I saw the first question that we got was also related to IFRS 18. Now, in IFRS 18, there are new categories and subtotals available for the statement of profit or loss. So that is something which can be tested in your exam. The examiner has clearly said that there can be a theoretical testing also identifying why the new format gives better information as compared to the old format. So maybe it can come in an investor analysis question in which you have to tell that why the investors are, or how the investors can have better information when they're using IFRS 18 as compared to the previous standard. So you have to focus on the 5 categories that are now there: the operating, investing, financing, taxation, and discontinued operations. And you have to tell that the new subtotals that have been added, like operating profit, profit before financing, and income taxes, all of these, how they are giving better information to the stakeholders. Also, IFRS 18 can be tested in a way that it can be asked that what information is going to be shown in which category. So you'll be given a scenario. It's not going to be a theory question, but a scenario in which, while doing the practical application, you tell how that's going to be presented in the statement of profit or loss. Then there are management defined performance measures. your exam can ask you that it can ask you to prepare a reconciliation also, that because the MPMs, as per IFRS 18, it is required that in practical application also the MPMs should be linked back to the IFRS related figures. So over here, you may be asked to prepare a reconciliation of, let's suppose, an adjusted operating profit in which a non-recurring item has been removed, and link it back to the IFRS calculated operating profit. And the examiner also may ask you that why is this reconciliation useful? What is the impact of it? How will the investors' decision making be impacted by it? Then IFRS 18 also focuses on aggregation and disaggregation. So that is an area that can be tested, that investor issues, and with respect to ethical issues also, it may be tested in the context of different standards, that what information needs to be aggregated, what information needs to be disaggregated, and how it is useful for the users of the financial statements. Or, like I've mentioned over here, it can come up in your question number 2 also, saying that a company is trying to aggregate some information in which you identify that they are trying to, hide some information or camouflage it. And that's an ethical issue. So there are multiple ways in which this standard can be tested. Then impact on other IFRS standards. As you know now, IS 7 is always going to start with the operating profit. So that's a different treatment. In that aspect, it can be tested. IS 8 has been renamed, and with some very small parts like going concern, accruals, fair presentation, compliance with standards, that has moved from the what used to be previous IS 1. It has moved to IS 8. So that is also something which can be tested in your exam. Now, in case of effective exam strategies, a couple of things that also I would like to highlight over here. I will go back to this slide, and I would like to highlight that integrated reporting has been removed, but in sustainability reporting, the examiner has repeatedly said that the students are still giving very generic answers in terms of sustainability. So the examiner has clearly said that sustainability is going to be tested in the future exams. Not exactly your exam attempt, but it is going to be there in the future exams. And particular application of IFRS S1 and S2 is going to be tested. So no generic statement questions like why sustainability is important, why it should be incorporated. No. Now the examiner is going to look for particular application of standards, right? And there, as I said, in case of IFRS 19, it's mostly going to be identifying that, when IFRS 19 is going to be applicable and what the disclosures are going to look like. These are the two areas which can be tested. This is a smaller part, but of course it's there in the syllabus, so it can be tested, but only from these two aspects. Now, coming to the last part of my presentation today, with respect to effective exam strategies, we have talked about a lot of different issues over here. Now, first thing is that how you should read the requirement. Reading the requirement is very important. Identify the verb in the question. Identify the technical area by reading the requirement. I always recommend start by reading the background information, skip the exhibits, and come to the requirements. Because once you have read the requirement of a question, then when you go back and read the complete question, that is something which is going to keep your mind very focused, right? So that saves time. So follow this approach while reading your questions. So identify the verb in the question, identify the technical area which is going to be tested. For this, there is no shortcut. You have to prepare the syllabus. You need to practice the available exams to know how they are going to be tested. Now, in one requirement, at times there are multiple asks. One of them is rule of and, where the requirement says and. Or just like we saw in question number 1, it said investments, talk about investments. So see whether they're talking about multiple things. It means that the marks allocated are broken down. Look at the number of marks, answer accordingly, notice the time that you have, and see if you're being asked for a specific format. In case of identification of verb, the three most commonly verbs coming up in our exam are calculate, explain, and discuss. Calculate asks you to just do numerical calculation. Explain means tell the examiner in simple words what the accounting treatment should be. And discuss means that there is normally more than one issue, and maybe you have to choose between two accounting treatments, or you have to guide about a certain issue that is there. So in that case, we call it a discussion, right? So pick up these keywords. These are from the latest exam attempt. So you have to see explain with calculations. In the next also, in accordance, discuss the accounting implications of the two contract modifications. So you have to provide the complete working in this. Now, in case of structure of answer, uh, write as the information has been provided, use small paragraphs, relevant accounting treatment, focus on 1 mark at a time. This is very important. Just focus on gaining 1 mark, complete the information for gaining 1 mark, and then write enough points for the mark allocation. And avoid any kind of repetition, because that is, the markers are experts. They can identify where you're trying to say the same thing in different words. And how can you get to know about it? Through the previous marking scheme. As per the structure, always follow this structure. What has been asked? Why are you writing it? And so. So this is what we call state, apply, and conclude. State means you just, this SAC, keep this word in mind, SAC, SAC, while writing your answer. State means you have to briefly write about the relevant part of the standard. Then you have to apply it to the scenario. This is most important. And then conclude to show the answer and the recommended action. I took an example from the past exam papers also for this, but these are the about the structure that you have to clearly reference them if you're using formula, or you're using the working which is there in some other box. So, and own figure rule also, your examiner is very generous. If you make an error at any point in time, remember you will be penalized only once for it. So going forward, all the answers are going to be with respect to that the working that you have done. Focus on easy marks, low hanging fruit. Always pick that out in a question. Please don't be overwhelmed if there is something that you haven't covered. Focus on the easy marks, write them and grab them first, and explain all your workings. Now, this is an application of state, apply, conclude. And with that, I will also conclude my presentation, move towards the questions. This was the question 3, part A. It talked about a contract modification. So this part, this question number 3 part, the initial working, you'll have access to this presentation also. This only talked about state. It only talked about the relevant part of the standard. So because the part was dealing with modification and students wrote the 5-step model, the students who wrote 5-step model perfectly for revenue recognition, they got 0 marks because still it was not relevant. So state, then application was done for contract 1 conclusion, then application was done for the contract 2 and the conclusion. So keep this stepwise approach in mind: state, apply, and conclude, and there are separate marks available for it. So you can see there were 3 marks available for writing the IFRS principles, which is the state part. For contract 1, 5 marks. For contract 2, 5 marks. Again, these are 13 marks. Maximum you could get were 8, even if you write 8 out of these available 13 marks. Okay, so the examiner is actually very generous. This part I just covered because I know this comes up in Q&A, so I will quickly open it for you, that even if you find a question extremely tricky and you haven't covered it before, this is the approach you can take and write your answer. This is all from my side. Now I'm going to quickly move on to your questions to see what has been asked, and I am going to cover it accordingly. So, sorry, just a okay. So I am going. Just take a minute to read this. Meanwhile, I'll start reading your questions and start answering them. I hope you have found this information useful and you're going to apply it in your exam. See, I can provide this information to you, but the application is on you. You have the resources available, Study Hub, you have practice platform. Now it's on you to practice all of this, all of these recommendations. Okay. So the one question is that Janani has asked, the sample answers are different from mine. How should I maximize the marks that I get? The expectation of examiners would be helpful. Janani, the sample answers can be different from you. They are for a placed winner answer. But like I did the debrief for you for the question number one, please do keep in mind that as long as you're answering the questions, and I honestly believe that at times the examiner answers, they are slightly more flowery in language. So writing it in simple words, you can get marks for it. The markers are going to award you for it as long as the answer is relevant and it is applied to the scenario. And in case of calculations, the calculations are correct. Okay, so that is something which needs to be done, and the examiner's expectation, I see you asked this question very early on. I hope now it is clear to you what the examiner expectation is. Another question by Mani Case, can we still use the reference regarding IS1 in exam, or do we need to refer to IFRS 18? Thanks for asking this, Manik. I know this is a common confusion. No, you cannot make reference to IS1 now. Your exam, our exam is now focused on IFRS 18. You need to prepare according to IFRS 18. You need to write everything as with reference to IFRS 18 because now that's a part of our syllabus. Rachel has asked about how should we time out each question. Rachel, I have already discussed this, that, don't see the overall time of the question, see the parts, and with every part, multiply that with 1.8, and that is your marks available. Remember, not just for writing the answer, for reading the question, requirement, planning, and writing your answer. So what I would strongly recommend is that when you are practicing at home, before the exam, use the same approach, use the same kind of time bound, do the same kind of time bound practice. That is very important. In your mock exam, do the same kind of time bound practice. Okay, Ritika has asked, ma'am, can we do cell referencing? Ritika, you can do it, but it needs to be the working should not be very complicated. The example you have shared is fine because it is up to 3 digits. However, it's even better if you can, the working that you're doing, in front of that, you write reference of working number 2 and you put the figure over here instead of linking it to the cell. But linking is allowed as long as it is not too complicated. So up to 3 figure working, that's fine. Nicola has asked, what do you mean by applying? Do we adjust the standards to the answer and apply? No, Nicola, by applying, I mean taking the relevant part to the scenario. This question number 3 that we just discussed, that's like a perfect example of it. Like we talked about it was talking about contract modification. And I told you that there were some students who would perfectly write 5-step model. I know if I had had more time, I would have written 5-step model and asked you to mark it. And many of you maybe would have given me marks for it. But the thing is, applying to the scenario means keeping it very relevant. So the answer just wrote the modification part of IFRS 18 and then did the calculations according. That means applying it to the scenario. So keeping it very relevant to the scenario. Another example that I gave was with respect to defined benefit and defined obligation. The question was asking about defined benefit scheme calculation. By the way, guys, that's also, I can give you an example of an application of IFRS 18 that can come up in your exam. The examiner may ask you to classify how a defined benefit obligation working is going to impact different parts of the statement. So, remeasurement goes to OCI. The current service cost is going to be a part of operating activities. The interest is going to be a part of investing activities. So that kind of questions can be asked. But main thing is that whatever has been asked, answer what has been asked, not what you know. So keep it very relevant to what has been asked within the question. Don't write anything extra about that standard, because that is not going to get you any marks. And that's going to waste time. So, that's not then worth it. Will the standard name and number be related to the question mentioned in the question itself? Meet, not always. It's not always mentioned in the question. You have to identify it and you have to write the working accordingly. You don't need to write the name of the standard. The number of the standard is also good. If in the off chance that you don't know the number of the standard, just write the relevant standard says this, but the accounting treatment should be correct. That's very important. But at times the examiner tells the standard, and at times it's not told. Then what is the best way to use the 15 minutes reading time? Patricia, I would say don't spend it reading the question. Deep dive into answering the question immediately. Use that time in answering your question, because if you read the whole exam, that's not going to help you, because by the time you'll be done with the first question, so much would have gone through your mind that you would have forgotten what the last question was asking for. So just take a glance as to what the questions are about. And like what I did in my exam, it was the previous version of SBR exam, but I glanced through the exam and there were a couple of things that I knew that under the exam pressure, they may skip my mind. So I immediately just wrote a couple of pointers related to it. So you can do some kind of this thing, but 2 to 3 minutes, just glance through it and start with the question that you want to attempt. Use that time over there. That's my recommendation. So Stacy has said, how much do I need to write to get the full mark? Is making the point even short and sweet enough to get the mark on offer? Absolutely, Stacy. As long as the answer is relevant, you don't need to write long sentences or paragraphs to get it. Normally, when you're talking about a full mark, it's when you are in the state part, because we have a 3-step approach. State, apply, conclude. You state the relevant part of the standard. So that is what it can get you a full mark. So stating the relevant part, like I talked about the contract modification. Now let me take you back to that slide. So in case of a contract modification, they said according to IFRS 18, a contract modification is a change in the scope or price of the contract which has been approved by both parties. So clearly stating what a modification means, that is also something that can get you a mark. Okay. Now, how is it accounted for? As a separate contract, if the scope increases, addition, etc., this second part could get you one more mark. So you don't need to write long paragraphs to get marks. Yes, short, sweet, but relevance. Relevance is the key over here. The most important part is the relevance. If the answer is relevant, then even if it is short, you can get the mark for it. What should be used instead of this is ethical comment. Avantika, you had to write how is it an ethical issue. That how is going to get you a mark. So this is an ethical issue because this is posing a self-interest threat, or it is a compromise on the integrity of the person, or this is showing a lack of competence which leads to a lack of professional behavior. So you just don't say it is an ethical issue. You tell that because the finance director, let's suppose, is doing the wrong accounting treatment, it shows that the professional competence is not there. And therefore, the integrity of the, or maybe, if it's deliberate. So if it is deliberate, you say they're manipulating the financial statements, which is a compromise on the integrity of the individual. So writing, it's an ethical issue. It's not going to get you any mark at all. Writing in context, why is it an ethical issue? That's going to get you a mark. Question number 3, what are important standards to study? Priya, anything can be tested from the syllabus. I would just recommend, considering the time that we have now, maybe You don't need to go into a lot of depth of these standards, but cover everything broadly. Anything can be tested. We can't question spot. Then, can we use subheadings in question two to separate answers? Absolutely. Alfat, absolutely. In fact, it is recommended that you use small headings, and that will help you in a proper structuring of answer that can get you professional marks also. And which topics are usually connected with question number one and two? Actually, it varies. In question number one, like we've seen many times, IS 19 getting tested, IFRS 9 getting tested, but any standard can be tested. It's not something that we can pick. And question number two also, any wrong accounting treatment, any standard can come up. And we've had questions in which related to the blockchain, etc., were tested. Like, and I gave you the example. IFRS 18 can also be tested, like saying that someone is trying to aggregate the information which should not be aggregated. So any standard can come up. I can't really pick and choose in that. And then
Alina, I am just
you're back. Okay.
conscious of time.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So before we close, do you want to say anything to the students who just keep on asking the question like what are the important topics or anything which can come in the exam and all?
I would
So
just say that we can't pick and choose the topics. There can be no question spotting because there are different versions of exam that come up. So just broadly cover the syllabus. Try to practice as much as possible. Yes. Historically, I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but historically, we have seen that in the September attempt, there is a probability of the newly added areas to be tested in the exam. So you should be absolutely competent on them. Please do not mix up that working, and I'm sure you'll be good. And if there are any further questions, this link is going to be shared also. I will try to see there also if there are any comments that come up and respond over there. So, but please don't question spot. Just focus a lot on practice and practice within the platform so that you are very comfortable with it. And I hope you found the session useful. Apply these techniques. Now that's on you.
thank you, Alina. So I'm just afraid we are just short of time now. So I just wanted to run this quick poll. If every one of you can answer this poll quickly, which is coming on your screen now, if you can just please fill this for me to let me just to help me understand that when mocks are getting released or when their debriefs are getting released, so that will be really helpful. um, I am just waiting for some responses here which have not started yet. Oh, it just started, but please be quick because there is a right answer, but there is nothing wrong because you will get to know the right one. So please don't worry. Let me help you all and fill in this poll for us. Okay, I will just wait for with the countdown of 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. I am pushing the results for you here. So maximum of you are mentioning 8th August and 15th August. So let me tell you, yes, that's the right date. So don't worry if you are wrong here, no problem. Now you know that 8th and 15th August are the dates. So mocks are already there on the practice platform. And debriefs are going to be released just day after tomorrow. And you will find them on ACCA Study Resources YouTube channel. Link is available in your resource section. So reminding you of these three important resources before we close our session today. One is the practice platform, from where you have seen so many question examples which Alina has shared along with the examiner's reports. And another is the study resources YouTube channel, which I have already mentioned that you will get debriefs, but yes, many more videos are available there. And the finally study hubs, that's the hub of all the exam resources related to your exam paper chapter wise and the practice questions as well. So with this, I would now like to say thank you to all of you for joining us today. and you can watch the recording of the session again. You can using the same webinar registration link, and also you will get an email tomorrow to let you know, to share the link with you so that you can watch it again. Thank you, Alina, for your support, and
Thank you.
special shout out to the team working behind the scene to help make this session run smoothly. Wish you all the very best for your exam preparations and exam uptake. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye. And best of luck.